Air 100, we have an officer down. Officer down. Code 3. Code 3.
Well, the cool thing about this game is that it's a genre that's been neglected for quite a while, and we're really putting together the newest technologies to make this, to revitalize the role-playing game segment. It is a multi-user game, so you can play over the internet with your friends. There is incredible replayability because the dungeons and items and monsters are regenerated randomly each time you play.
Every time you go into a place, it looks different.
You'll never play the same game twice.
What's in a name? Shakespeare said a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, but people forget the character who said that was a foolish teenage girl who drives a dagger through her heart at the end of the play as a way to rationalize her dubious romantic choices. A name means something. When your parents held you at the hospital, they could have called you anything, but they chose to call you one thing. And your last name? Well, for better or worse, that's the evolution of millions of lives all colliding together, and if I may quote Dr. Manhattan, to distill a form so specific out of all that chaos is like turning air into gold.
Here's the big challenge of life. You can have more than you've got because you can become more than you are. That's the challenge. And of course, the other side of the coin reads, unless you change how you are, you'll always have what you got.
Starting a business is like having a child, and the mortality rate in that space is staggering. So many people trying and failing and trying again, but you know what they all have in common? They spend a lot of time picking that name, just the perfect one. Johnson & Sons Towing, a family business, a name you can trust. I've been thinking a lot about names lately because I've begun to notice that many names I associate with quality have turned into a bad remake of Weekend at Bernie's, where they prop up parts of my childhood with a stick and make it do party tricks to convince their shareholders the ship isn't sinking. Blizzard is that thing that happens when it snows and gets really windy at the same time, but I'm from Arizona. I don't know about blizzards, but there used to be a developer called that in the before times, and golly, were they the holy paladins to gamers everywhere.
The sanctity of this place has been fouled.
Every release was pure, liquid gold, and they cared about their fans, their opinions, and they made the type of games their earned audience desired. That audience made them wealthy and enabled the company to make more games, solidifying their place in the annals of gaming history. By the 2010s, the gaming space had moved on from fawning over accessible UIs to a new phrase, the modern audience, and everybody got hard to work trying to capture them. But the thing about this new audience is they don't play games, or if they do, they don't play the kind of hardcore experiences that Blizzard historically offered. So they had to make something new, something that would compel both the existing and the new customers to play, which would double their profits, right?
But it's also part of a larger pattern of behaviors in which some men go to great lengths to manufacture reasons why women don't belong in their subcultures and hobbies.
When is this gonna stop?
In 2008, Blizzard was acquired by Activision, and we the fans were told that this wouldn't affect the quality of the games, but it did, on everything from World of Warcraft expansions to remasters to even their mainline titles. The company is a shrunken husk compared to its former glory. Now, in this situation, I feel sympathy for two groups. One, the actually talented developers who work their whole life to be employed by their dream studio, only to get there and find a bunch of people with casual suits prostituting the thing they love for every last bit of gold they could extract. And two, the fans of Blizzard, who since its founding in 1991 have bought the games, played the games, told their friends about the games, and ultimately paid for every major release that came out of the studio for over 30 years. Blizzard doesn't exist without them, because just like their games, even the Mona Lisa would have ended up in a trash heap with the old ET cartridges if no one saw the value in it and hung it up on the wall. Blizzard owes everything to their fans, and like the rest of the gaming industry, they're finding this modern audience with bottomless pockets is a pipe dream, and what they should have done is make the core fans happy first and worried about the rest of it while they counted their money. Aesop has a fable about a dog going to the end of a dock. He's got a bone in his mouth, and when he gets to the water, he sees his reflection, but thinking it's another dog, he opens his mouth to take both the bones for himself, but the one he held sinks to the bottom of the lake, and he can never get it back.
Send in the Marines! We're the Space Marines!
Oh, it's Maggie Stewart.
Hello, Brad.
Hi, Maggie.
Most successful people will tell you that before they made it big, they didn't know the future that they'd be successful. They just believed in themselves enough to get out of bed that morning. There, I saved you a fortune on self-help. Such was the case for three men in Irvine, California, who each put up $10,000 to start Silicon and Synapse, a then indie developer that mostly focused on porting games between systems. These men were Alan Adam, Frank Pierce, and Michael Morhaime, just three guys with a dream that wanted to do something they loved. But though they found some success, the name wasn't right. They then became Chaos Studios in 1993. Soon after, they started production on what would become Warcraft 1, and development costs threatened to shut them down entirely. Brian Fargo, creator of such titles as A Bard's Tale and Wasteland, the early predecessor to Fallout, was trying to publish Warcraft through his company, Interplay, but the trio eventually sold to the educational game developer Davidson and Associates. Now, I'm sure if you grew up in the 90s, you played at some point in the computer lab a version of Math Blaster. That was Davidson and Associates, and they eventually bought Chaos Studios for $6.75 million with the agreement that the studio would retain full creative control and would be able to work on games as they saw fit. Following this, Chaos Studios was sued by a Florida-based technology company as they owned the copyright on Chaos. And to avoid a lengthy and costly fight, the three men changed the name again to Ogre Studios. But that name, it still wasn't quite right. And the folks at Davidson were quick to say so. And the group came to settle on the name Blizzard, which didn't mean anything, just another tech company with an empty one-word name trying to establish themselves in a competitive space. Then, Warcraft dropped in 1994, and Blizzard became the name of a game studio, and furthermore, a name that people began to respect. Game developers in the 1990s were rock stars. They appealed to a very niche audience, to be sure, but among that audience, they were kings, and people idolized them. They motivated an entire generation of kids to make games themselves. They were cool to us, the gamers, the unwashed, the unsuspecting suckers that would scrape up all the money they had to play the next game from their favorite studio. Without us, Alan Adam could have been a janitor. Maybe Frank Pierce would have been the regional manager for In-N-Out, and Michael Morhaime would have moved to Sri Lanka to tame Komodo dragons.
Wow. I feel like I'm in the Highlander.
Davidson and Associates is, unfortunately, no longer with us, having sold to CUC International in 1996. This is, of course, the soulless conglomerate famous for acquiring companies by cooking their books and inflating their stock price. Both of the founders were serving decade-long prison terms by 2006 for embezzlement and fraud. In the previous episode, we talked about Sierra Games, who was acquired by CUC International in the same year, directly after they released Daryl F. Gates' SWAT, which if you want to know more, the link for that video is in the description. That same year, the three founders would acquire a studio of their own, Condor Studios, run by an energetic young man called David Brevik, who was working on an unknown RPG about slaying demons in a cathedral. At this time, Goldbox D&D and its various clones, along with the likes of Lord British, had saturated the market. So David was at a crossroads and finding difficulty in funding the development for his project. I like to think that the guys at Blizzard saw a lot of themselves in David, who was just like them a few years ago. It helped that he had a literal gold mine on his hard drive, but I always say all altruism is self-serving. As David was living in San Mateo at the time, Condor Games became Blizzard North, and they opened up offices and started productions on their new RPG. This game would be about a man returning from war to find his home besieged by demons. It was turn-based, utilizing fractions of seconds tied to different actions as a unit for measurement. And you'd fight your way through the various levels until finally you reach a boss at the end. If the 90s loved one thing, it was action. New 3D graphics with higher resolution and faster, more responsive controls were sweeping the industry, with consoles like the PS1 releasing in 1994, and that same year of 1996, the brand new Nintendo 64 had set the world on fire. By this time, Blizzard North was already well into development, and their parent company was starting to point out that slow, turn-based RPGs weren't exactly novel. David balked at the idea of compromising his personal vision, but then something interesting happened. Something game studios across the board lack today. He listened. He shut his mouth. He put his ego in his desk drawer and opened up his ears to the feedback not only from his peers, but more importantly, the preferences of the people that would one day buy his game.
When I started making Diablo, I started designing it in high school and started working on it. And it was originally kind of a party-based game that was similar to the other kind of party-based games at the time. There was like, started out with wizardry and might and magic and Bard's Tale and like all a zillion types of RPGs like that.
I find it funny. I watched so many David Brevik interviews to research this video, and I noticed that he always tells the story the same way. It was a cold, dark night. David had just been outvoted by his peers, and he accepted that he had to switch to turn-based combat for action combat. He was worried that he'd not have enough time to rework the engine, but he sent everybody home and sat down at his desk and started coding. After a few hours, he was falling asleep, and he clicked on a skeleton, and the character walked over and smashed it. And then he continues to recount how it was like clouds parted and angels came down, and then he sings like, ah! I don't know if the story is true or not, but I like the way he tells it. Now, David already had a name for the game picked out. He named it after a mountain outside San Francisco where he grew up. I like to think of a young man looking up at that mountain every day. It fills him with awe, this mountain, and it's got a mysterious name to boot. The young man then creates art, and he names it after the mountain that inspired him, and his creation becomes a cultural icon, a mountain in its own right, that the next generation then looks upon and wonder. Obviously, the company was pleased with the addition of the action combat, and on December 31st, 1996, when the game released, it was met with overwhelming approval, and it had sold 1 million copies by November of 1997. They called this game Diablo. Diablo I was massively impactful on my childhood, and I have many fond memories sitting in my brother's room on his PC, taking turns trying to get to the bottom. Diablo somehow missed the boat on causing parental panic, and any scruples were easily hand-waved away as I am destroying the demons. So how could it be bad? There are definite faults with the game. The walk speed in town makes you want to tear your hair out, and baby stepping to the witch Adria's hut, who sells the all-important scrolls of town portal, is enough to sour your mood. That's probably how Leah in the third game was created. The warrior was tuckered out from going down to the witch's hut to buy potions, so he decided to stay the night and a baby happened. Also, there is the combat. Even given the time of release, there isn't a lot of variation in the method by which you kill your enemies. While Diablo 1's style of combat was novel at the time, it's also a one-trick pony, and as the warrior, you'll spend the entire time baiting enemies to doorways so you can chop at them one at a time until you get to the lower levels, which are wide open spaces you'd best be well prepared for. Gear is sparse and up to random chance. Because of this, it's not just possible, but very likely you won't have the pieces you need without rinsing your game and starting over. You can achieve this by clicking on your character name in the menu and selecting New Game. Just be sure you've collected everything left on the ground in Tristram, as once you move on to a new game, it will be lost forever. Rinsing will also start all progress over, but allow you to keep anything you hold in your inventory. Some side quests in Diablo 1 are randomized, so you won't get all of them by playing once. Griswold, the town blacksmith, and Wirt, the shady gear-hawking child, have randomized inventories, so rinsing the game will reset those as well. Normally, Griswold's inventory will reset every 3 levels, and Wirt will have a new item you can pay to view after every level, so it's worth stopping by the town periodically to check their inventories, which won't be a problem because you'll be coming back to spend all your blood-soaked coins on potions. Pepin, the town healer, will also become your best friend as you venture deeper into the depths of hell, as you'll begin to notice that your health is significantly reduced. Certain mobs will cause health drain on you, and the only prescription is more Pepin. Needing to constantly town portal to receive healing from him was a chore, but there isn't really an instruction to the character on how to solve it or that it's happened at all, leaving them to confusedly work out what's ailing their character through inference. Some of these downsides, however, are also its strengths. In the dungeons, the slow walk speed and low visibility add to a sense of tension. You can't just roll dodge your way out of situations, and there is no sprint, so you're forced to commit to your tactics. The gear being rare and difficult to acquire makes finds like the Arcane's Valor and Doombringer all the more exhilarating. Returning to town repeatedly and talking to the different NPCs at different times might yield a new line of dialogue or even a side quest. The voice acting in this game is superb, and in general, the sound design is off the charts.
Well, there's a kid with more problems than even me, and I know all about problems. Listen here, that kid's got a sweet deal. He's been there, lost a leg, gotta walk around on a piece of wood. So sad, so sad.
I still listen to the Diablo I soundtrack while I play other games. The smashing of a skeleton or the slice of a blade on flesh, the creak of a door whispers in a far-off corner. The ambiance of Diablo's realm can be terrifying. Stats are broken down by attributes which are increased by 5 every level, and the stats you increase are very important as you'll beat the normal version of the game around level 22 to 25. As you can see from the final stats of my warrior as a frontline fighter, most important was vitality for a larger health pool and strength to increase my damage. But to forget about dexterity is folly. The enemies on the lower levels are evasive and you'll simply hit air. Even with Doombringer, which increases my damage 250% and adds 25% to hit, on level 16, I was only striking enemies every other swing. In an alternate universe, David Brevik would have fit in perfectly with the XCOM development team because 96% doesn't indicate you'll be hitting most of the time, it merely indicates that you've almost raised the number to its max value. Doombringer can be found on level 8 if Zar the Mad appears and you defeat him, he commonly drops it, though it can be found as a random drop as well. Zar can be cornered and cheesed between the 2 candelabras in his library, but you'll never make it to Diablo without resistances. Not as important on level 1 to 10, but venturing beyond that point without stacking up your resistances is a good way to die repeatedly. Your stat increases will only do so much. Gear will do the rest. And the 2 most important affixes besides resistances are hit recovery and attack speed. Hit recovery is how long your player spends in a stun phase after being struck and dictates when he can begin anew his own flurry of attacks. Enemies like the Smith or even Diablo himself all the way down on level 16 will make you wish you had it. Monsters will need to recover from your strikes as well, so a high attack speed will ensure you get the first hit, essentially stun locking whatever monster you're fighting. Designed to be more of a roguelike than an RPG, a new player might easily miss the all-essential gear dropped by completing side quests. First of these is the iconic Smith and his cleaver blade, deceptively located on level 2. It's a much better strategy to simply skip him altogether for now and instead make your way down to level 5 and solve the associated puzzle to grab Arcane's Valor. Boasting an armor class of 25 and providing fastest hit recovery, this armor will take you all the way to the end of the game. With this in tow, we can return to level 2 and defeat the Smith.
Fresh meat.
Later in Diablo III, the warrior would be retconned into Aiden, Prince of Condorus, and eldest son to King Leoric. In Diablo I, per the manual of the warrior, it's written, "Dark rumors of the mysterious demise of King Leoric abound, and the evil that lurks within his cathedral has drawn many warriors to Condorus, seeking fortune and glory. Though they were warned by the people of Tristram, a few of these brave souls have ventured into the chaotic labyrinth beneath the old church, never to be heard from again, whether they are driven by valor, honor, madness, or greed. New warriors arrive in Tristram every day, ready to challenge the dark unknown that awaits them beneath the earth." Which fits into the motif of a roguelike, where each of your warriors is another individual that has tried and failed to defeat Diablo. As far as weapons are concerned, there are only 3. The aforementioned Doombringer for the highest damage. Then there is Griswold's Edge. This is acquirable by completing Griswold's side quest to find the anvil on level 10 and provides 1 to 10 fire damage, knockback, fast attack, and a plus 25% chance to hit. Lastly is simply a random drop, but inarguably the best sword in the game, the Grandfather, which does less than half the damage increase of the Doombringer, but with none of the downsides. Which of these is useful depends on your other gear. I had an amulet that provided me 40 resist and fast attack, so for me, the Grandfather was the best option. If you're doing a straight 1 to 16 run with no shop resets, Griswold's Edge will likely be the best thing you find, followed by Doombringer. Once you get to level 16 and destroy Diablo, you're treated to a confusing finale. Your character finds that Albrecht, Leoric's young son, had been possessed by Diablo, and inexplicably, your warrior then takes Diablo's soul gem and smashes it into his forehead, containing the beast within himself. I would have at least asked Deckard what to do, but, there are no choices in Diablo, just more sorrow. By the time of Diablo II, the warrior had been all but consumed by the Lord of Terror and ventures east, leaving a trail of demons that destroy the town of Tristram and murder its inhabitants. The rogue, Morena, an alternative player option, has been corrupted by the evil she came too close to and has taken up residence in the monastery, rising from the dead her slain sisters and taking the name of Bloodraven. And the mage, Jazrith, has retreated into Horizon's arcane sanctuary, having taken the rank of summoner, where he calls forth the forces of hell to do his bidding.
I am so happy! Please welcome Peter Noon!
Damn right you ain't gonna tell me nothing!
I try to talk to you.
I'm gonna let this man come into my home! My home!
David Brevik wasn't the only creative force behind Diablo, and his two business partners at Condor Games were Eric and Max Schaefer. Eric Schaefer held the title of Senior Designer, Art Director, and Story Writer for Diablo I and the Project Design Lead for Diablo II. Max Schaefer designed the backgrounds and the scenery for both games. In 2003, along with producer and voice actor Bill Roper of StarCraft fame, they left Blizzard Entertainment, with only Eric Schaefer returning to essentially consult on Diablo III. Perhaps this was because of the restrictions placed on their creative freedom from parent company Vivendi Games, because someone with a tie and a briefcase likely thought a boardroom in France was better suited to make the decisions on what games Americans would enjoy. I say this to my friend all the time. No one that makes the experiences you loved even works at Blizzard anymore. It's just a name, and the days of its greatness are long behind it. The peak of greatness that was Blizzard North was the turn of the millennium, the year 2000, with the release of Diablo II. To call this game addictive and all-consuming is an understatement. There are heroin addicts that are less dependent on their needle than my brother and I were on this game. We played it before and after school, on the weekends, late at night after my parents had gone to bed. We ran bots when we were at school just to get the best loot. David Brevik describes the idea behind Diablo as a slot machine, and every time you kill a monster, you get another spin. Sometimes this will result in nothing or a small payout, but every once in a while you'll hit the jackpot. Diablo 2 is brilliant because it takes all the high points of its predecessor and polishes the experience to perfection. There are very few games I would officially give a 10 out of 10, but this sequel is hands down one of the best games ever made. It's not just best in slot of the ARPG genre still to this day, it defines it. When the term Diablo-like is thrown around, this is what we mean, not Diablo 4. I know that Rod Ferguson, who coined the term while reacting to the success of Path of Exile 2, thought he would join Blizzard in 2020, well after the best times were over, and get some kind of respect because the studio he works at used to make good games. But when a sequel is released, the hope is that everything you loved about the first game is still there, but there is just more to do in addition to that. You don't need to reimagine or deconstruct or add a new angle. There's a reason that the original was popular, and a sensible, wise person would build upon that sturdy foundation instead of leveling it entirely. The story centers around a team of heroes following in the wake of the warrior from the first game as he travels east to free his demonic brothers Baal, Lord of Destruction, and Mephisto, Lord of Hatred, from captivity and unleash them on the world. Marius is an opium addict, tortured by his memories. He is compelled to follow the Dark Wanderer as his companion, eventually being burned to death in hellfire for his trouble. Tyrael, the angelic ally and completely inept tactician, spends most of the game waiting for you in the Pandemonium Fortress and offers you what amounts to angelic moral support in defeating Diablo. If you've got Diablo II's expansion, Lord of Destruction, you'll follow Baal into Haragoth and defeat him, only for Tyrael to throw his angel sword into the World Stone and shatter it into pieces, allowing demonic forces to freely invade Sanctuary. He's the best player on their team. Diablo mirrors early biblical history in that there are multiple forces of good and evil controlling the wills of man. Names like Baal and Lilith and Belial are dead giveaways as they come directly from the Torah. But some names are altered, such as Asmodan being a stand-in for the biblical demon Asmodeus. The World Stone comes from the Tear of Anu, one of a pair of world-creating gods inspired by the Babylonian myth of Aspu and Tiamat. In Diablo lore, Anu is in constant battle with the prime evil Tahamet, and in their struggle, they destroyed one another, creating the angels and the demons. Anu's eye was at the center of creation and became the foundation for the land of sanctuary to be born. So before the retcons of future installments, this was a shocking development that filled you with more questions than answers. While the story, cutscene, music, art, and sound design are all top-notch, the game mechanics are the star of the show. The base game was brilliant enough, and scaling-wise, it's closer to Diablo I because things like set items and uniques matter a whole lot more. The year after release in 2001, Lord of Destruction came out, a full expansion to the game's story, but also a rewrite of its systems and scaling. In Act 2, one might find the Horadric Cube as they collect the pieces of the Horadric Staff, an object of great power that can transform items given they follow a recipe. Deckard will tell you a couple. 3 potions make an alternate version, or 3 stacks of arrows make 1 stack of bolts, etc. But otherwise, you are largely uninstructed in the nearly endless possibilities of this item. This was magnified by the release of Lord of Destruction, which brought the massively powerful rune words. Runes are random drops you can find mostly anywhere. Some of them are common, but multiples of them can be put into the Horadric Cube to make much more powerful versions. All runes have individual effects, some of which are useful, such as putting 6 Ist runes into a weapon to max out your magic item finding ability. The best use of them, however, is placing them in the correct order, into the correct base type to spell a rune word. Some rune words are not just powerful, but essential. Ko Vex Pul Thul in a flail base with 4 slots will make a Heart of the Oak, which gives you faster cast rate and plus to all skills. Or the ever-popular Ja Ith Bur, or Enigma, a chest piece that allows you to teleport across the screen. Of course, all casters know the delight of Ral Tir Tal Soul, or Insight, that when equipped on your Act 2 mercenary on a polearm weapon will give your character nearly endless pools of mana. Among Diablo fans at the time, some loved the changes and some didn't, but logistically they came out with the changes so quickly that it came to feel as if it was that way all along. There are criticisms of Diablo 2. Some decry its loot systems, saying that the rarity of the item drops is too severe and it shouldn't take 10 years to get a Zod rune. Here's why that's incorrect. In a word, trading. In many ARPGs now, there are restrictions on what you can give or receive. Some uniques are hard to obtain items are tied to your character only. The result is personal loot, usually tied to your class. So it's impossible to say find a cool rogue bow while you're playing, let's say, a paladin to sell off or keep for a future character. You're stuck in an endless slog of useless items clogging your inventory to either sell off or break down. It might shock you to learn that in the before times, one simply had to throw their items to the floor, and in any context or form, it could then be picked up by another player. This gave way to not only a thriving trading community, but the creation of the controversial forum D2JSP. If you go to the Blizzard forums and ask about this site, you might get a lot of derogatory responses if you don't get banned entirely for mentioning RMT or real money trading. For some, it's because they don't like the fact that someone can essentially buy in-game items, even indirectly, which isn't exactly how that works. D2JSP has forum gold, which you can purchase, admittedly, but after a season or so of selling items, you really won't have to. If you can navigate its rather convoluted website, you'll find a lot of nerds super excited that you have the drop they've been waiting for. And in addition, with every season reset, your forum gold becomes a lot less valuable as there's nothing really to buy. Path of Exile 2 has a great evolution of this and features a fully integrated website in the game that easily lets you search for and buy items, connecting players in seconds, all without any arbitrary restrictions on trade. I shouldn't have to deal with a diminished experience because the game developers can't figure out its own botting and scammer problems, and Diablo 2 had plenty of that, and even with a lot less moderation, we all got on just fine. The OpenBattle.net lobby chat and associated servers was a cesspool of hacking and lewd behavior. It was the literal Wild West. Diablo I was famous for this. It was almost impossible to find someone who wasn't at minimum duplicating items, which led to the creation of closed BNet. This version of the network was a lot more heavily guarded, and some types of repeated behavior might get you banned back to the pit of OpenBattle.net. But here is where you found your best friends, sometimes up late at night, not even logged into a game, just going back and forth with people in the lobby. Now, this all sounds awesome and totally wholesome. However, how does that make money for a company with shareholders and employees expecting a Christmas bonus. If I can sell you a widget that lasts you 20 years, you might say thank you and I might feel ethically and morally correct. But my kids can't eat correctness. My kids can't eat morals. My kids can't eat ethics. So instead, if I sell you a fridge that breaks every 5 years and I sell you 4 fridges in that same period instead, quadrupling my profits, why wouldn't I do that? In this way, Diablo II is a victim of its own success, and its success was incredible. At the time of its release, it was the fastest selling computer game of all time and had been in the top 20 selling games for over 2 decades. You would think someone with a profit motive would look at this success and think to themselves, that's a golden opportunity. If I make 5 more of these and consistently build upon the features while keeping the core experience familiar to the player, well, I could be rich. You'd think that. But Diablo IV made $350 million on microtransactions alone in the first year. So how are we to incentivize the industry when we constantly feed them, allowing them to waddle over like pigs and stick their snouts into the slop? Sales numbers are deceptive. There are entire international markets that Blizzard has access to now for publication that didn't exist in the late 90s, when computer and console gaming was really just starting to gather steam. Just like $1 in 1997 is worth $5 today, for every 1 gamer in 1999, there's now 20, many of which haven't played enough games to know the difference and will think your game is good. No one said that mediocrity can't be popular or sell well, but this is the point of why David Brevik and the Schaefer brothers left the company. They didn't want to make interactive chat rooms with a cosmetic store, they wanted to make games. Blizzard wasn't cool anymore. It was just another large company trying to sell well enough to justify its over-bloated budget.
Not your fault. Tell me, Marius, how was it not your fault?
The Schaefer brothers would learn a lot about failure themselves, and after they left Blizzard in 2003, they founded Runic Games, who released the ARPG and Diablo-like Torchlight in 2009. This and its sequel, Torchlight 2, were widely praised among ARPG fans, though the open-world mobile version of their IP was not. The studio closed down as a result of chasing trends, and Max Schaefer founded Ectra Games, which took the rebranded and slightly reworked mobilized version of Torchlight Frontiers and released it on Steam, calling it Torchlight 3. And this angered fans and ultimately led to the closure of that studio as well. Eric Schaefer ended up at Double Damage Games, who made Rebel Galaxy Outlaws, which was highly anticipated at the time, but was abandoned after the game director, Travis Baldry, had a meltdown over derogatory comments on Steam following his poor business decision of releasing the game as a timed exclusive on Epic's game launcher. David Brevik, on the other hand, found his own success outside of the Schaefer brothers' influence. He served as a consultant to Grinding Gear Games during production of Path of Exile, founded Greybeard Games, which released the indie title It Lurks Below that has a current score of mostly positive on Steam. He also founded Skystone Games, a publishing company that assists indie game developers with multi-platform releases. The only man I've mentioned still standing at Blizzard is Alan Adam, and he's bound to be up for retirement soon. Diablo 3 and its sequel, Diablo 4, are not Diablo-likes. They are ARPGs. Sure, you have the same characters, voice actors, same great cutscenes, etc., but when you dissect them, open them up, and examine their mechanics, you find that the only thing that's similar is the skin. The name Diablo, the name Blizzard, is what sells. The games themselves, however, are a far cry from their predecessor in terms of quality. I thought I disliked Diablo 3 until recently because I thought it was the worst the series could fall to. And then I played Diablo 4 and I realized the depth of incompetence at Activision Blizzard was actually bottomless, and quite like hell itself, it had no end. Diablo 3 is reasonably enjoyable and the systems are at least familiar but hollow. Tyrael isn't cool anymore, he's just some dumb guy with a broken sword. Deckard Cain, the series staple and in my mind its main protagonist, dies in the first act to be replaced by his apple fell very far from the tree niece. Runes are history, replaced by an overly simplified skill tree and overly complicated gear affixes. The standard normal, nightmare, and hell level progression formula is replaced by increasingly difficult torment levels that never seem to vary or end. In spite of these shortcomings, it's still an incredibly fun game to play, and if it didn't have Diablo on the cover, if I wasn't expecting all the features from Diablo 2 plus more, I might even counted it above average. What it left me with is low expectations of the future of the series, and by the time Diablo IV released, they were so non-existent that even the base level of effort would have reignited the spark of my passion about this series. I sat through multiple seasons, all of which were, quote, the season that would save Diablo. Save it from what, you may ask? Why, from itself, of course. I remember playing with a friend when Diablo IV launched. We had gotten to Daryl, and in the middle of the fight, he had to step away to attend his son. At this point, I was having a lot of fun in the game, and I made it my mission to protect him until he got back. After a while, I noticed my health wasn't actually decreasing, and neither was his. There were no stakes in this game, just a rather boring trek to get to mostly forgettable boss encounters before leveling up enough that you can get to the ones with the one-shot mechanics. That's the summation of Diablo IV, and the experience that you'll have while playing it. But with respect to Rod Ferguson, that's not what a Diablo-like is, and as we've established, names matter. To be a Diablo-like, you should really look to the example of Grinding Gear Games, who recently released Path of Exile 2, and in my opinion, this game is a better use of your time than Diablo 4. PoE 2 is difficult at first, much like Diablo 1 and 2, but once you learn your way around its intricate and vast leveling system, you'll be clearing mobs with ease. As I mentioned previously, it has fully unrestricted trade, which is easily accessible and simple to use. Another thing that distinguishes a Diablo-like is innovation, and in both the end game and the introduction of skill-based combat into the traditional ARPG formula, the end result is nothing short of brilliant, and I've enjoyed my time with the game and look forward to more. Among my friends, I commonly refer to it as Diablo 3. Blizzard also tried to incorporate new and innovative MMO-type elements into Diablo 4, but the experience fell flat. One game doing this very well is Lost Ark. This game is a treasure. It feels like you're playing a Diablo-like mixed with Final Fantasy Online, which features a more traditional MMO combat but offers a breadth of customization and content which Lost Ark has in spades. For a more retro feel that really hits the mark on the difficulty of early roguelikes, many of which inspired David Brevik's design philosophy, there is the Tower of Kalamanvo. This game is punishing, to say the least, and not for the faint of heart. But it was made by one person, and in the indie space, it's a lot of fun getting frustrated over never being good enough to beat it. There are so many options available, all with the differing innovations on the genre, that Diablo in its current form is unable to compete. At the end of the day, Blizzard has bills, and they need to pay these bills, and they have employees and managers and executives and contractors, and all of those people have other people that rely on them. So nobody eats if nobody gets paid, and when you've grown to that scale, the priority becomes monetization and not innovation. This was something that the Schaefer brothers and David Brevik realized in 2003, and in time, everyone else that had handcrafted the experiences that defined your childhood realized it too and departed the company, leaving behind a board of directors lording over overworked and underskilled labor that was cheap enough to purchase to produce a passable lobby in which they could sell microtransactions to justify their budgets to their new dystopian overlords at Microsoft. In some ways, they weren't unsuccessful, and Diablo 4 didn't smash any world records, but it didn't sell poorly either. I just wonder, over time, as they release more and more mediocre content, if the name Blizzard will be evergreen and never lose its luster, or much like its namesake, will it come in a strong gale just to quietly blow away into irrelevance. The sad truth is that we made these companies so big and demanded so much that it was inevitable they'd pass the threshold of incompetence, and I can't help being reminded of a Doug Stanhope joke when he said, "Tradition and heritage are dead people's baggage. Stop carrying it." We, the consumers, prolong the slow decay of the thing we love. We buy the expansions, the new games, the battle passes, and the cosmetics. We keep hoping that this time, this expansion, this will be the one that brings me back to a time when things were okay, when I was okay, and just for a moment, I can escape the worries of my life. But that's not a profitable way to make games these days. So instead, they're going to fill that empty hole with this battle pass for $14.99 and as many $39.99 cosmetics that your credit card can handle. When you get so bored that you leave entirely, come back next season and pay again, because we promise it's better this time. I do realize it's unfair to criticize a group of game developers who not only never worked on previous games, but also had no original creator present during development. To show up for work and be told to make Diablo basically from scratch is insane, granted, but it's definitely better to burn out. It's terrible watching a loved one waste away in their hospital bed, and when they finally pass on, it can bring feelings of relief. In 2003, when Blizzard North's founders departed, it was effectively dead, and in our desperation, pain and sorrow, we buried it in Stephen King's Pet Sematary, hoping to bring it back to life, but instead being forced to watch something we loved morph into a parasitic zombie bent on self-destruction. It's time to pull the plug. Remember the good times and let the blizzard blow away.